Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steven. It is time to finish up these AFC, NFC, North, South, East, West grading videos. We're going to finish up with the North here, as you can tell by the thumbnail. And real quick before we get into it, because I had a couple of stupid comments last year, so let's get on the same page as far as how the grading goes here, kind of. So as far as the player grades that you will see, first of all, I was live here on YouTube for the first round, first day, second day, third day as well, but the first day, second day are up on YouTube. So you can look at those. You can see me as I'm grading the players throughout, but it was almost exclusively an objective grading system that I used, and they earned anywhere from an S to an F, including an E in there. Rounds 1 through 3, the baseline was an A, meaning if a guy was taken in the heart of the second round and I had a second round grade on them, then they got an A. However, rounds 4 through 7, if somebody's taken in the heart of the fourth round and I had a fourth round grade on them, then they got a B. There was some more nuance to that system, but that's generally how it worked. And what I will tell you is when we go through this, when you see a plus or a minus, mostly pluses, next to players, that's going to tell you a lot about how I felt about the draft, because the pluses generally mean that they were my guy. Sometimes they might mean that I love the fit. Maybe some combination, that maybe they're a borderline my guy and I like the fit quite a bit. Something along those lines. Was this system perfect? No. But was it fair? Yes, completely. As far as the team grades go, I gave 50% of the team grade to a completely subjective grade from myself. I look at the haul that they got, a little bit, how well they did with the picks that they got. And did I like the vision? Did I like how they worked around the draft? Did I feel like they did well in the draft and got themselves some good players generally? Is just how that's going to work. Then 35% of the grade are the number of players taken at the end of the day. If you take every player in the draft, on average, you're going to end up with, I think it's 5 Hall of Fame players on your roster, not to mention all the other great players that you would be getting along the way. If you can't draft any player, you're going to have 0 Hall of Fame players on your draft class. So at the end, the idea of being able to tell the future is an imperfect system here with these players, and so quantity has its own value within the draft class, regardless of where they're taken. However, if they're taken higher, of course, that did create more value for that grading system. They were, contributed better towards that grade. Finally, 10% of the grade was the actual player grades from rounds 1 through 3, and 5% of the grade was the player grades from 4 through 7. So let's get on to the show. So in terms of my subjective grading, just looking at this as a whole here, this is a pretty darn S-tier job of drafting, in my opinion. The Baltimore Ravens touched upon all areas of need efficiently while staying patient and letting the board come to them. The only reason I'm not giving it straight up an S grade is because most of the picks I'm not 100% sold on. You can see I only have 2 pluses there, 1 minus. Would it be a shock if only one of these guys is a starter in 4 years? I don't think it would be a shock. Would it be a shock if 6 of them are starters in 4 years' time? That wouldn't be a shock to me either. So this was kind of a borderline A+, S- tier for me. But then you look at the final 3 picks of this draft. They're the 6th, the 7th rounders. I know they're pretty rarely do they end up contributing, but also plenty of them do end up contributing. And I just don't see these, I don't have these guys pegged as guys who are going to end up being contributors down the road. I didn't really care for these picks. The final pick, I don't know. To be fair, I don't know about that guy. But that's what kept me at an A+ here. So all in all, I thought the 50% of the grade here is an A+. You look at Nate Wiggins at pick 30. Did think there was a decent chance he would be available. Wasn't sure if he'd be a Ravens guy or not, but he is one of very few and maybe even the most likely guy to be a cornerback that you could trust putting on an island to just shut down any type of cornerback, to be perfectly honest, any type of receiver, to be perfectly honest. Very, very good. Will he be able to hold up at the next level is a big question. That is why he gets taken at the end of the first, almost drops in towards the second. I think San Francisco would have been interested in him as well. So I don't think he was making it out of the first, but very, very solid pick. That was an S-tier pick for me. I had him pegged as more of a solid first-round talent. So getting him in at the end of the first round was nice value, I thought. Offensive tackle Roger Rosengarten, gave that a B plus. He isn't my guy. Really liked Roger Rosengarten. I'm not the only one. A lot of people did. Offensive tackle fits a need here. I like the pick. So there you go. Just a little bit early for me. That's all, but it's okay to be early sometimes. We don't need all A's and S's for me to like the draft. Adisa Isaac, not a guy who I have a whole lot of hope for. For the most part, how I felt about it was a lot of his production came from cleanup duty. Other guys on the roster funneling the quarterback, the player, towards him on a lot of plays. That's what I saw. So I was a little bit concerned about him at the next level, but a solid talent and has a lot of tools to work with regardless. Then in the 4th round, you sit patient with this wide receiver in the deep wide receiver class, and you end up getting Devontae Walker, a guy who I thought some team would probably pop off on late 2nd round. I had a 3rd round grade on him, so that was a great value to me. The upside with Tez Walker is great. He really stunk throughout the process, and tanked his value, I believe, for the draft because of that. TJ Tampa, another guy who they just, Baltimore Ravens are known for this. They're just like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're one of some teams who they just seem to get lucky all the time. They tend to take these players who we see falling down the draft board. TJ Tampa, no different. People didn't love. I don't know that many people loved TJ Tampa, but I think this was a bit of a surprise. Rasheen Ali, another my guy, immediately stood out at the Senior Bowl. He was very, very talented. All in all here, where did the Baltimore Ravens land? They got an A/A plus, just borderline there, so very, very strong grade for them. That's going to move us on towards the Cincinnati Bengals. So here's the draft that I like a lot. You can see all of those pluses, but we have 6 pluses in there, almost exclusively A's, B's in terms of the player, where they were on my board and where they end up getting drafted. So pretty much good value, never excellent value, but value to good value, or I should say at value to good value for most of the draft, and maybe a little bit of reaching here in the 3rd and the 4th round. But outside of that, really strong draft. I love Amarius Mims, love the upside. I think that he could end up being the best offensive lineman in this entire draft come 2 years from now, and this is a very strong draft class. So good job, Cincinnati, and that fits them. Chris Jenkins, really, really like him a lot. The person just as much as the player, from what little I know of Chris Jenkins. So that was A plus, and I thought that fit a need as well. Jermaine Burton, character issues, but boy oh boy, could end up being one of the bigger steals of the draft at the end of the day. A lot of people thought he could have been like a 1st round talent if it wasn't for I would have probably said 1st, 2nd round, but if it wasn't for his character issues, but still gets going in the 3rd round. McKinley Jackson, another guy, a little bit of a reach here for me. Would have liked him to do a little bit better at the combine is essentially what it came down to, but I think a strong option here to help plug the missing DJ Reader, and just help against the run in general too for this interior defensive line. Eric All was a guy who they pegged as a guy that they liked. I understand it. Very much big injury history for him, and he's coming off of an injury, probably not going to be an impact this year. So I had him pegged a little bit lower, but he is a classic Iowa tight end, and they always turn out well. Josh Newton, I have a little, may work best in the slot, inside-outside versatility, but limited. Put him in a position to succeed, and I believe he will. Yeah, he's my guy. I liked him a lot. Tanner McLachlan, also really, really good tight end prospect there. Might be able to help you out this year even. Cedric Johnson, really liked him a lot as an edge from Ole Miss, I believe, if I can recall correctly off the top of my head. And Dijon Anthony, a safety/cornerback prospect. And then center Matt Lee, also very interesting. At the end of the day, I failed to find much of any flaw in this draft. I think Cincinnati had a low-key perfect draft with 6 guys who I think the upside is infinitely exciting for, and 4 more who basically the same could be said about, even if those 4 weren't my guys. So even these guys without pluses are all guys who I find still quite exciting. And I might have cut myself off. I do that. Matt Lee was a guy who has a very exciting profile. I just ended up with 7th round draft grade on him. but I can't argue against taking him, that's for sure. So at the end of the day, we ended up with an A+/S-, one of the better drafted graded drafts in this class. Let's go on to the Cleveland Browns. They obviously did not have a first round pick, nor did they have a fourth round pick. In the second round, I did mock interior defensive lineman Michael Hall Jr. to the Cleveland Browns in my final mock draft. So obviously, I think that that's a good fit. This was a little bit early for me on Michael Hall, but he's also a very interesting prospect. So I understand that I might have been a little bit lower than the league on him, and this might not have been so much of a reach as my grade would indicate. Then Zach Zinter was a guy who I would have pushed up my board a little bit more if I had more confidence, but I liked him a lot. He is my guy, B+ grade there. Maybe a little bit of a reach, but Zach Zinter was a guy who I pushed up as high as I could, and kept wanting to get him up higher and would kind of talk myself out of it. Then in the 5th round, had a Browns fan in chat. We were trying to predict who the pick would be. Jamari Thrash ended up being one of the top 2 names that I was predicting to go. We really were predicting to go for Cleveland here at pick 156, and they went there. So obviously think that that's a good fit. So did Cleveland Browns fan, and that was an S tier. I thought that was a solid value at that point in the draft as well. Linebacker Nathaniel Watson was my guy, C+, a little bit early, but still liked him a lot. And cornerback Miles Harden, S+, love the value there. I believe that Miles Harden will be best working in as a slot cornerback, which is where a need may be popping up the soonest in that Browns secondary. So I thought that pick also made a lot of sense in terms of a fit. I think you had a good guy there in the 7th, another one of those mid to later round secondary defensive guys in general that you guys are going to turn into a stud. And then interior defensive lineman Juwan Briggs, all I can say in analysis on him is that I like the name and it fits the interior defensive line. I thought this was a solid draft for the Brownies, giving it a strong B, not really being able to argue against any of their decisions. Yeah, it's a solid draft. You're missing out on a little bit of capital and all that, but nothing to complain about too much. At the end of the day, missing out on the capital did hurt them, and a couple of reaches, especially in this grading here, did hurt the overall grading. C+/B- overall. It's not going to be one of my favorite drafts, but I thought they did pretty solid here, and I think that you're going to get some solid contributors, and maybe I would say most likely stud out of this group to me would be Miles Harden, but Zach Zinter also right up there in that same argument. I guess the guys that I love here. Nathaniel Watson, though, that's a long shot, of course, linebacker. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers draft here, and as you can see, Troy Fautanu opened up this draft, offensive tackle. That set a tone for the rest of the draft for Pittsburgh that I am here for. Big fan of it. A lot of times, fans get upset when you take them 2 offensive linemen. I think Pittsburgh has had such a recent history of poor offensive line play that they're over it. I think Pittsburgh fan is probably supportive of this draft, and they got. Not only did they get 3 offensive linemen here, but they got 3 excellent offensive linemen, and they got 3 guys who there's a theme here, and it's speed and mean, or athleticism and mean, and toughness. So you don't always find athletic guys that are also tough. That seems to, typically those are kind of 2 different realms, because the guys who aren't ultra athletic, they have to play tough. The ultra athletic guys, they can use their speed or athletics in order to play a more finesse game. Well, Troy Fautanu, very athletic, but he's also got some mean to him. Same with Mason McCormick, and Zach Frazier is just that stereotypical center, so he'll fit right in with the Steelers. If you haven't heard the story, by the way, real quickly, Zach Frazier last year breaks his leg in game while he's playing, obviously. And the man tried army crawling off of the field, or he did, in order to prevent for him and his team having to take a timeout while they were on offense, trying to go down to score, to win the game, tie up the game. I don't know the exact situation. And how can you not love that? So Zach Frazier's just, football guy. And this offensive line is so in good shape now. You got to absolutely love it. And not only that, but the next two top positions of need for this team, wide receiver, cornerback, and linebacker, actually. So two of the next three highest needs for this team, wide receiver, linebacker, they also get. And you can see, I think that they got at a value, and a guy like Peyton Wilson, my guy, there's a reason that they got him at a value. No ACL. That is not good. It's quite bad. But also, guys have played in the league for a long time without an ACL. So I'm rooting for Peyton Wilson. I loved him. He was a guy who I wanted the Packers to take once, twice. They didn't either time. But as you can see, all S's, all A's. Fantastic draft here. Finish it off with Logan Lee, interior defensive lineman. You can always add to the trenches, and I'm never going to complain about that too much. And Logan Lee was a very interesting prospect. I had, I think, a 5th/6th round draft grade on him. It might have even been a 4th, 5th, now that I think about it. S tier. Ryan Watts, cornerback. Another my guy here. Once again, hitting that area of need. Yes, quite late, 6th round. You're not going to expect too much out of this, but he wasn't my guy. I liked him a lot. So, all in all, obviously, it's a simple and clean draft. They nailed it with every single pick while also attacking their needs and not reaching. It's an S-tier draft. The only piece of criticism that I had would be to have taken 2 cracks at cornerback with those final 2 picks, Logan Lee, Ryan Watts, instead of just the one. But you can find undrafted free agents to come in and compete. So it's not even like a real harsh criticism. Like I said, easy S-tier draft grade for me. Now, you might be curious, I gave this an S-tier. You see a bunch of A+, S+, S's, like an A. How does this actually end up getting lowered to an A+, S- if that S-tier was 50% of the grade? Don't forget, 35% of this grade was from the value of the draft picks, value and number. And the baseline for that was a B. And they got an A- for the value of these draft grades. So that's what pulled this all the way down to not quite fitting into an S tier. Just to give you a heads up on that. That's going to bring us on to the NFC North with the Chicago Bears to start this out. Obviously, this could be a franchise-changing draft for them. No doubt about that with Caleb Williams. Followed up with Roma Dunze. I didn't think they would do it. I'm so proud of them for taking Roma Dunze. I also, I would have, in terms of the grading and everything, they might have gotten a better grade if they trade back from that 9th pick, acquire a little bit more capital, add a few more pieces. But you take the studs when you can get them at the same time, help out this offense, help out Caleb Williams. I thought this was a fantastic draft. As you can see, all S-value draft grades there. I can't argue against the decision in any of these cases. Roma Dunze, not quite a my guy, but fantastic pick and also fit. I think you're happier that Roma Dunze makes it here than Malik Neighbors. Kieran Amagaji, great pick. You love that. He's recovering from a torn quadriceps injury, which might have pushed him down the draft a little bit. I thought this was great value at this point in the draft, but if it wasn't for that, he probably would have been like an early 2nd round guy, I would assume. So lots of upside with that. You love that. Help out that offensive line. Yet again, help out Caleb's for the long term. And you finish this off with edge rusher Austin Booker. He is a my guy. Absolutely loved him. Did not have a great process. His combine wasn't what you had hoped for. That definitely pushed him back. Things didn't match up. You questions were raised instead of the possibility getting verified with the numbers is what it is. So he had a chance to push himself into being like a 3rd round guy, 2nd round even, depending on exactly how well those numbers went. But at the end of the day, he hurt his draft stock a little bit. Still, I thought a value here in the 5th round. I think a lot of people would agree with that, and a my guy there. So fantastic draft outside of one pick. So for me, for a few reasons, this is not an S+ tier draft, but obviously that was on my mind as a possibility. And what it comes down to is I may have been able to overlook some of those reasons if not for the stupid 4th-rounder punter pick, which we glossed over so far. At the end of the day, that lowered this S-tier draft down to an S-. You need to remember that 35% of the grade comes from the amount of picks. That's draft capital. We just went over that. So, obviously that is going to impact this grade. B, as I explained, is the baseline of that for scoring. And heads up, the Bears were 1 7th-round pick away from getting a B. So they end up with a B- on that grading. So that's going to hurt them. And at the end of the day, that punter pick ends up slashing some points off for a total of 55% of the grade. So that's how we ended up with going from a possible S+ tier grade to an A tier grade for me. Punter ruined it all, man. Make no mistake, this draft class could be the turning point for this organization for the next decade plus, and they did a really good job with the picks that they took. So really, really great draft there for Bears fans. Obviously, you have nothing to complain about. That's going to bring us on to the Detroit Lions. And here, I think that you could complain about some things in this draft, Detroit, but you can also get quite excited about some things. So, I would have liked to see them invest in an edge rusher in this draft, but given that this was not a strong edge rushing class, and how the board fell in the first 2 rounds, I would not hold that against them too much. Still, this draft class leaves something to be desired despite an absolutely fantastic first 2 rounds there. You get Terrion Arnold, you get Ennis Rakestraw Jr., and Levitt Rakestraw, my guy, Terrion Arnold. Not quite my guy, but some people's number 1 cornerback in this entire draft at pick 24. Obviously, that's absolutely fantastic, and your secondary is an area of need. I also would like to add, you see I have defensive back for Terrion Arnold. I do think that he's a very versatile piece yet again that they're going to be adding there. They'll probably use him out on the perimeter, but over time or maybe depending on some sort of packages and how well some of the other cornerbacks that they've added to this roster turn out, they could also move him around, safety, slot. He can play everywhere across your secondary, depending on exactly what they want him to do. It would determine how well he'll do it, but I think, a fantastic piece for that secondary for Detroit. At the end of the day, I landed on a B draft grade for my subjective grade. I was being pulled towards going higher and lower, but that ended up feeling about in the right space for me. I do think that the Lions got 4 good players, and if true, then this will be a good draft class when the books are written about it. So at the end of the day, they got a B/B+ for this draft. Nothing to sneeze at. Giovanni Manu, I didn't look into him. Wasn't a prospect that I know anything about, so he didn't really impact the grading here. But Sione Vaki, not really my flavor, I suppose, for safety. I didn't quite see it as some others did, but this was where I thought he should get drafted, so the value was perfectly fine on drafting him. And then Mekhi Wingo, Christian Mahogany were those other 2 where I was saying there could be 4 players that will be successful here, because Mekhi Wingo, thought you got a bit of a value here in the 6th round and a very interesting prospect that I think fits very nicely for the Lions. I'm pretty sure I probably talked about the possibility of drafting him in the Lions in a video or 2 where I went into like the 3rd, 4th round. And then Christian Mahogany there as well. Good pick for the Detroit Lions. Let's move on to the Green Bay Packers draft, and they drafted the most individual players of this entire draft. This is a version of what I did in most of my mock drafts for the Packers, talking about this first 2 rounds, even into that 3rd, 4th round. This is what I was doing for them. Before the whole running back thing, I'd always be taking running backs from 2. I'd take 2 running backs, 2 safeties, 2 linebackers, because of all the draft capital that they had when I did a few, like during the playoffs before I was doing mock drafts, just looking at my Packers mock drafting. So it held strong in terms of Jordan Morgan's a guy who I have mocked to them with this pick. I think he's an excellent fit. He is a borderline my guy. I was higher on him than most. That brings us to the 2nd pick. I always pick linebacker. It was between Peyton Wilson and Edgerrin Cooper. I always went Peyton Wilson because he's my number 1 linebacker, usually being the number 1 linebacker off of the board, and with the athletics and everything, I thought they would like that. Didn't know he didn't have an ACL, of course, but I did mention in at least one video that I always go Peyton Wilson, but the odds are, honestly, because of the injury issues, that Edgerrin Cooper will be the pick for the Green Bay Packers, and it was. Javon Bullard was the safety that I always continuously drafted down the stretch to the Packers. My guy, love it. Thought this is also a good value at this point in the draft for him. So S tier there. Marshawn Lloyd, not a running back who I was projecting to the Packers, but to be honest, in my final mock draft, I did Ray Davis. And that I talked through it on the video of why that's actually probably a bad choice, because it left the Packers with 3 power backs, no receiving back, no explosiveness ultimately, like just 3 power dudes. So it makes sense they did not go that route, and Marshawn Lloyd totally is a fit. This is why I end up with a plus here. It's an excellent pick. It's a little bit early for me based on how I have my board. Then they also took linebacker Tyron Hopper, and this was where I said there's a second time that I wanted the Green Bay Packers to take Peyton Wilson. He was still on the board here. Tyron Hopper was my guy, but I had a 6th round grade on him. This, to me, was early. Same here with Evan Williams, safety. This, to me, was early. And so you will see, I think that they realized that too. Talked about this in a different video for maybe Indianapolis, where it's like they went down the board for a guy who I understood it. I like that guy a lot. And then shortly after, they're like, oh, you know what? There is a lot of risk with that pick. Let's take one more. So they always needed like at least 2 safeties from this draft, so tripling down actually does make sense for them. They went back and they got Keaton Oladapo. He was an absolute my guy. I thought that this was a good value. I had like a 4th round draft grade on him, top 10 safety of mine. I liked him quite a bit. As far as I know, I was on an island with that. Then here's another guy I didn't hear anything about. Absolute my guy in Jacob Monk. Dude killed it at the combine. Super athletic. That's what you want to see from a center. And I did think that there was some need here for the Packers to create a succession plan for center, or just outright replace center, depending on exactly how they felt and how the board fell to them. They end up getting Jacob Monk here in the 5th. That was early for me, but only because this is another guy where I just didn't have the gonads to go higher, because like I couldn't find hardly anything on him. Like I was just seeing people, I don't know where he was on the overall board, maybe 300, 400 or something like that for the consensus board. So I was high on him with like my 6th round draft grade or whatever I had on him. Otiako Travis Glover, I'm not familiar with. Michael Pratt, quarterback. We talked about this while we were live on air during the 3rd round, or during the 3rd day of the draft, as Michael Pratt was falling a little bit. That what did I think about him? Somebody asked, and I said I think that he is an absolute excellent backup quarterback. And to get that in the 7th round, I think makes sense. That's why the Packers probably took that, despite getting my guy quarterback of theirs last year in like the 5th round, who nobody thought should be drafted. They go and they get Michael Pratt to compete also within their system. Always bringing in quarterbacks. I respect that. Good job, Green Bay, ultimately here. I thought that was a good value for Michael Pratt, somebody who I thought could go earlier than that. And Kalen King also thought would go earlier than that. This is another one of those stories of a guy who he came into the season as a possible 1st round grade. Absolutely people loved him. Had a very, very bad year at Penn State. Didn't have a good offseason either. The process didn't work out for him very well. So he ends up falling all the way to the 7th round. Like I said, I thought he would go in the 5th round. I thought somebody would pop off on him as early as the 4th round. At the end of the day, I gave this an S-. Lots of pluses here. The order doesn't exactly fit what I would have expected. Lots of lesser grades. So actually, I amended the grading here. This moved that down to an A+. I moved it down to an A+, and at the end of the day, everything else was pretty much an A+ too, so they ended up with an A+. That's going to bring us on to the Minnesota Vikings. And just a quick overview for them. I struggled between an A or an A- for my subjective grade. The lack of 2nd and 3rd round picks hurts for me, as does taking a kicker. And the last pick in concern, with the limited amount of capital for a team that I think can stand to upgrade, at a lot of positions yet. I could use a third wide receiver, for instance. I landed on an A/A- subjective grade for them. But you start out with J.J. McCarthy. I think that's a strong pick, and I like where you got him, and I liked how they got him. I like that they did not spend capital. This would not have been an A pick if they would have gone and gotten him at the 5th. They ended up spending plenty of capital in this draft class, but that'll hurt future grades. That doesn't hurt, or if it could have hurt this grade as well, because they did get rid of some picks in this class. But I don't take into account exactly the trades, just the players, where they were taken, and I'll let the other value work itself out. So edge rusher Dallas Turner here at pick 17, absolute fit for the Minnesota Vikings system. Makes sense. There was one or two occasions, and I definitely always thought about it, except for the quarterback need. But where if they were not going quarterback early, if they were picking quarterback like pick 23, where I was taking Dallas Turner for them at pick 11. So to get him here at pick 17, despite what they had to pay for it, I thought, you got a good player there, good value. Can't argue against it. Kyrie Jackson, I thought very good value, S-tier cornerback pick for them, and I thought that they needed more help in that cornerback room. So it makes sense for me. Same with offensive tackle Walter Rouse was my guy. Had like a 5th, 6th round draft grade on him. One of many my guy offensive linemen around that area of the draft in terms of my board. Then the kicker pick, talked about not loving that. Interior offensive line, interior defensive line. With your final 2 picks, never going to disagree with addressing the trenches. Michael Juergens, that was at value. I had like a 7th round draft grade on him. So there were some more on the board that I would have taken over him. But to each their own. At the end of the day, B+. Big plus. It was not a small B. It was a B, big plus. Very, very close to being a B+/A- grade for them, but it did land in that B+ territory. That is it. Thank you so very much for tuning on in, and I will be releasing a video with all 32 teams and ranked in order of the best to or worst to best drafts. So check that out, and take care, guys. Peace out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.